Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today is very laser focused. We're diving into one single powerful source that, on the surface seems completely mismatched. We're looking at the intersection of meticulous software engineering and serious long-term botanical observation.
It's a classic case, really, finding that really high-value, specialized knowledge in the most unexpected places.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our source is an entry from a personal blog titled qianmeng.org, Notes on Gardening, Part 767.
Right.
So we're essentially sifting through the field notes of a dedicated amateur to pull out the critical truths about one specific, and I think often overlooked, plant.
And that plant is Orthosiphon aristatus. You probably know it by its more common names, cat's whiskers or Java tea.
Cat whiskers, I like that.
It's a species that has historical importance, for sure, but in terms of modern landscaping, it tends to get sidelined. People treat it as this delicate little medicinal herb. So our deep dive today is designed to maybe change that perception a little. We're here to validate or maybe even overturn some common assumptions about this plant using the author's rigorous real-world data.
So it's not just about what the plant is, but what it can do.
Exactly. What it's capable of achieving in a less than perfect environment. That's the core mission for you, the listener.
And what makes this observation so trustworthy is the context of the observer himself. The author, he goes by Ang, describes himself upfront as an old software plumber.
A software plumber. I love that description.
Isn't it great? His day job is rooted in precision, in deep systems work for free and Libre open source software, or flawlost.
Think about that mindset.
Yeah, think about that intellectual rigor. He's working in worlds defined by absolute logic, long-term maintenance, complex systems. He mentions things like Haskell, Rust, Go. These are not simple tools.
No, not at all. And that technical background is absolutely crucial to understanding why these gardening notes are so valuable. The mindset you need for functional programming, like with Haskell, it demands extreme precision,
Right.
exhaustive testing, and appreciation for how systems, depend on each other. You can't cut corners. Every single variable matters.
So you take that same analytical rigor.
Yes, that desire to understand the underlying system rather than just, patching the surface. You apply that to botany, and you get something far beyond what a typical hobbyist produces. You get structured, long-term documentation.
And the structure really tells the story here. I mean, this entry is part 767.
767.
That is not a weekend hobbyist. That's an astonishing level of sustained, dedicated observation over, years? Decades, maybe?
It has to be. It speaks to a commitment to continuous learning that is just so rare. And Ang gives us a timeline, noting that this current entry actually builds on part 619.
Wow.
So if you think about the time gap between those two entries, you realize he wasn't just impulsively writing about this. This was a long process.
That's a critical piece of background, isn't it? So back at part 619, he was still, and I'm quoting here, weighing whether to acquire a specimen for evaluation.
The theory stage.
The theory stage. He was doing his literature review. He was being cautious.
Precisely. And now, hundreds of entries later, part 767 is the field study. It's the confirmation. He moved from theoretical consideration to real-world validation.
It's the difference between, reading a Wikipedia entry about a plant and running a verifiable long-term test on its actual performance.
Exactly. And he needed to do that test himself because he explicitly states that cat's whiskers is not a common fixture in roadside landscaping.
It's an underdog.
It is. You can't just learn about its true potential by driving around town. You have to actively seek it out and document how it's doing in the real world.
Which brings us to his discovery.
Yes.
So, Ang sets the scene. He says he stumbled upon a cluster of them during a field study at a well-known park while he was just out running errands.
Which I love. It wasn't some grand expedition.
No, it was opportunistic.
An opportunistic find, but, it's one that only an observer with his level of background, someone who is constantly evaluating the world around him, would even stop to notice.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. It's the context he provides for the environment itself.
Yes, the counter context.
Oh.
He immediately launches into this pretty scathing critique of the park's maintenance. He calls the grounds disappointing and says they could be much better maintained.
He even throws in a little jab about the park's funding, doesn't he? He says the failure is particularly bad, given the owner's strong financial standing.
He does, and that might seem like just an editorial comment, but it serves a real function.
How so?
It establishes a baseline. He's telling us this park should look magnificent, But it doesn't. It sets a very, very low bar for the environment where he found this thriving plant.
Right. So he's confirming the conditions are objectively poor, not just, failing to meet his super high software engineer standards.
Exactly right. This is the crucial point. Because then he delivers the knockout punch. Overall, across this huge, well-funded but neglected park, there were very few flowers in bloom.
Wow.
The whole place was demonstrably underperforming. It was, you could say, horticulturally depressed.
That stark contrast is really the key takeaway then.
Yeah.
The environment was struggling, maintenance was lacking, color was scarce.
Mm.
And yet the cat's whiskers wasn't just surviving in that environment. It was visually dominating it.
It was the exception. So the question becomes, why? What did it look like that made it stand out so dramatically, especially to someone who is, by nature, looking for flaws?
The author's description here it's almost poetic for a technical blog. He talks about its visual performance, noting the plant displayed profuse white blooms.
Profuse, that's the operative word, isn't it? It wasn't a sparse little scattering. It was an explosion of health.
And he details how those white blooms stood out vividly against the park's evergreen backdrop. Now, this isn't just about color. It's about year-round contrast.
What's fascinating here is that evergreen backdrop, especially in a temperate climate, often means just shades of, muted green and brown for long stretches of the year.
Very dull canvas.
Very dull canvas. So this plant delivers high visual impact precisely when color is most desperately needed and hardest to achieve. It becomes a primary source of brightness when other things have just given up.
And we know this visual impact was significant because he says the cluster was striking enough to catch his eye from a distance.
Right. You don't spot a fragile, poorly performing plant from a distance in a huge park.
Right.
This is confirmation of its visibility and, by extension, its practical use in any kind of large-scale design.
So that observation from a distance, that leads him to a conclusion about how it needs to be grown.
Yes, it allows him to draw conclusions about its cultivation. He states that based on the growth patterns he saw, it's clear that this plant thrives in clusters.
Okay, now that shifts the whole narrative. If you only see cat's whiskers as like one small isolated plant at a nursery, you might think it's too delicate or wispy for a big planting.
Right, you'd be afraid to commit.
But his field data suggests the complete opposite. Mass planting is the secret to its success.
Absolutely. The density provides mutual support, maybe it helps with moisture retention, or it just creates a much stronger visual statement. It confirms that the best practice for this species is to move beyond the individual specimen and treat it as a colony.
A colony, I like that.
And this leads him to another major structural takeaway. Ang specifies that when it receives the proper maintenance, which, ironically, this cluster probably wasn't getting enough of,
Right.
the plant can reach the size of a shrub.
Wait, let's pause on that. A shrub. Most people think of Java tea as a small, delicate herb. You picture a few light stems you prune all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Shrub size implies substance, a structural presence in the garden.
It fundamentally reclassifies the plant. It moves from being a delicate border filler to a potential low hedge or maybe even a foundation planting. This is the gap between expectation and field reality.
Wow.
His observation proves that with the right care, which he notes as being the potential state, it becomes a robust structural anchor, not just a fleeting floral accent.
So just from this one field note, we have confirmation of its resilience, its striking visual contrast in poor conditions, the fact that it needs to be clustered, and its potential for shrub-like growth.
It's a profound shift in understanding for a single plant.
Ang didn't just see a flower. He quantified its resistance to failure.
So to summarize the distilled knowledge we've just pulled from part 767 of Ang's notes, Orthosiphon aristatus is a structural powerhouse. It's capable of delivering reliable, profuse white blooms that contrast vividly with typical evergreen landscaping.
And crucially, its success is amplified when you group it.
Making it a highly resilient and visually impactful choice, even when the maintenance around it is less than ideal.
So what does this all mean? I mean, we learned that detailed, verifiable, expert-level knowledge isn't just confined to academic journals or, expensive consultants. It can come from the garden notes of a software developer who just happens to approach his hobbies with the same intense analytical rigor he applies to programming.
The same rigor he'd use for Haskell or Go.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, you now have a specific, expert-validated observation on a plant that is consistently overlooked. It's evidence that the patient, methodical process of observation, even on something as seemingly mundane as one cluster of flowers, yields powerful counterintuitive results.
And that leads to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with, which is, I think, less about botany and more about methodology.
Okay.
Eng's blog documents these meticulous projects across multiple diverse fields: programming, dieting, photography, and, of course, gardening. It's all characterized by that same level of long-term commitment.
Hundreds of detailed entries.
Right. So consider this. What can you learn? What unexpected deep knowledge can you discover by applying the core commitment to detailed, long-term observation from your primary area of expertise, whether that's finance or medicine or engineering,
Or teaching anything.
to a completely different, seemingly unrelated interest, like, say, writing part 767 of a personal journal? That cross-pollination of rigor just might be the true hidden key to profound mastery.